We come out to dance.
6:51 in Trinidad and Tobago. Will people be dancing happily next year, given the concerns about the economy, the continuous to and froing in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago, the labor situation, job opportunities, security of jobs for many people in Trinidad and Tobago? Is it an uncertain period even amidst these celebrations, Christmas into New Year's, then Carnival and all of that? Well, let's get a political / labor / social perspective from David Abdulah. He's the leader of the MSJ, the political entity known as the Movement for Social Justice, nursing a bit of the flu like so many people in Trinidad and Tobago these days, a flu that doesn't want to go away in a hurry. But David, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Fazil. Good morning to you and morning to all of your viewers and listeners. And I hope that people had a very quiet and relatively peaceful Christmas.
Well, we hope so. Well, for those who want to have a quiet one, there are many who don't want to have a quiet.
I suppose quiet is relative, yes.
Exactly.
Quiet is relative.
There are a lot of things.
Liming, I suppose, for some people is quiet.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
Exactly. there are a lot of things that might be a little different in Trinidad and Tobago. And thanks for accepting our invitation to be with us this morning when you might have been much more relaxed at home. But we want to take some time assessing where we are politically, where we are as a nation moving into 2018. What perspective do you have to offer?
Well, I suppose the fact that we have all these headlines now about a song by Massive Go Sign is an indication of where we are. The society is as polarized now, perhaps even more so than it was 20 years ago in many respects. Some of the issues, of course, have always been there. And I was, some of the points that have been made about hypocrisy in the society, I think that is very true. So the divisiveness is not going to enable us to get out of the economic crisis that we are in, or to resolve all of the problems of institutional collapse. How many murders? I think we up to
487 according to the Express count.
487. Getting close to the highest murder toll that we've had, which was just over 500, maybe 10 years ago.
2008.
10 years ago, and so on. So to deal with institutional collapse, crime, and all of these other issues, unless we have a country that is significantly cohesive around a common vision and with some kind of clear pathway to move us forward, we're not going to be in a good place. So politically, I think the divisiveness is very, very problematic.
And David, I'm glad you and all the guests are turning up this morning, because it becomes repetitive.
Yes.
To talk about the same thing and to try and find a different angle about the same issue. Do you get any sense that either the people are pushing the politicians beyond this divisiveness, or the politicians themselves are prepared or mature enough to move us away from that?
I don't think that the two traditional parties are capable of moving us away. I think the culture of those parties being ethnically
and of
based.
course it will be. I have to be fair and jump in and say, of course you will say that because you are leading a political entity who would therefore want to promote your organization at the expense of the two main parties.
Fair enough, and I see Andy Johnson kind of trying to take a little dig at us in the Express today. But I think if we are fair and honest, the culture of those parties has been a culture of appeal on the basis of ethnic solidarity. And because of that, they cannot escape the divisive nature of their politics. And so even if there are individuals within it who don't like it, don't want it, don't agree with it, ultimately when it comes down to the election day, that is the appeal that gets made to people. So in that regard, there is a growing number of people, I believe, in the country who don't want it, who see the futility in that type of politics, and recognizing that our institutions of state, so this goes now beyond the political personalities, it goes beyond the parties themselves and so on, but the institutions of state are in serious crisis. I mean, there's 2 pages in the Express today about the state of the judiciary in 2017. And we know the crisis that is there. We don't need to repeat all the things that have been said and so on. But it's not only the judiciary in crisis. Look what happened in the parliament with the anti-gang legislation, which collapsed. at the vote, that was an indication where the parliamentary arrangements failed the country, whether it was to either resoundingly come out and say no to the legislation because it was bad legislation, or to overwhelmingly vote for it because it was good legislation, but it failed the country. So in so many respects, our institutions are collapsing or have collapsed, and more citizens are recognizing that. Of course, the $1 million question is how do we change that? How do we fix that? And that remains a challenge.
We have a few minutes to the news, just a couple of minutes, and I'll just my own view. In fact, let me get your reaction to it, in the sense that even the judiciary matter, I don't know if I'm reading it wrong, but you get an undercurrent of race in that as well.
Yes,
there's an undercurrent of race in everything.
Yes.
How do you deal with that in your dialogue with people who appear to be well educated, who appear to be very successful in their various endeavors, but still in almost every issue, the first and the preeminent issue is race?
Yeah. I don't know that one can do anything other than to try to set it out in a historical, factual context, and to challenge the notion that every decision that is made begins from the standpoint of advancing an ethnic.
But it seems to work. I mean, we're looking at an image while you're speaking of Satchar, for the former CG.
Yes.
And you see the clear issues coming up. Well, they went after the Indian man. The PNM went after them. And now they're going after the one who's of African descent.
Right.
And it always comes up.
And when we do that, what we actually ignore is the economic issues and the economic interests that are involved, so that people will engage in the ethnic battle, but not address the fact that persons, regardless of ethnicity and so on, who control economic power and for various periods of time, political power, have kept the status quo intact. And therefore, it can't really simply be a matter of race. We also have to address other issues, such as class, social structure, geographical, where people live, where they come from, and so on. All of those issues, I think we need to have a very open discussion in the country. If we don't have an open and frank discussion about it, then it remains either embedded in people's hearts and minds, and it comes out when people analyze issues from an ethnic standpoint, or they say it in the living rooms and drawing rooms or the bars and rum shops and so on. It doesn't advance the country in any way.
And in the 20 seconds before we pause for the news, do you get the sense that those well-to-do, well-educated people are prepared to move beyond the ethnic consideration?
Some are and some aren't, and it also applies not only to those issues, but the labor capital divide. Some are, some aren't. And one just has to try to have a conversation to move it forward.
Well, we're going to move our conversation forward with David Abdulah. I'll leave it up to him to take us in any particular direction that he would like to, as far as the politics and where we are as a society in Trinidad and Tobago when we resume our dialogue, because so many of these issues, we've trodden over it time and time again, and we just try to find different ways of saying exactly the same thing. But we have the news, and then we'll continue the discussion with the leader of the MSJ, David Abdulah.
Good morning. With a news update, I'm Vernon Ramesar. The mantle of Roman Catholic leadership in TNT will be passed on to Bishop Charles Jason Gordon today, when he is installed as Archbishop. He will become the 11th Archbishop of Port of Spain during an installation mass at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Archbishop Joseph Harris, who is retired from the post, will lead the installation rites. Traffic will be prohibited around the southern, eastern and western areas of the Cathedral in Port of Spain from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. The ceremony begins at 5 p.m. Archbishop-elect Gordon was appointed to the position in October by Pope Francis. Close to $1 million in damages in Tobago as popular sports bar Barcode along Mount Marie Road, Scarborough, was gutted by fire yesterday. The fire started in the kitchen area of the establishment. Divisional Fire Officer of the Tobago Fire Service, David Thomas, told TV6 the building is worth approximately $6 million. Owner of Barcode, David Mirage, was called to the scene, along with other family members. Officer Thomas told Team 6 that the fire spread rapidly to the roof of the building, with south and northwards damage to the bar area, including damaged electrical equipment. This fire occurred mere days before the sports bar's popular I Love Soca event. And planned Boxing Day celebrations some St. Anne's residents may have envisioned were dampened after an electricity pole fell on Upper Ariapita Road yesterday afternoon, causing a power outage in the area. TN told TV6 it hoped to resolve the situation before today. To the weather forecast, today you can expect partly sunny conditions at first, with light to moderate showers just after midday. The forecast maximum is 29 degrees Celsius for both islands.
Christmas is family, and family is Bradford. Stand out with the very best suits, blazers, and tuxedos. Let Bradford take care of you this Christmas with the latest styles of shirts from Van Heusen, Carvin, and Perry Ellis. Stylish and comfortable shoes by Mr. Jones. The latest trends in ties, bow ties, cufflinks, socks, and other men's accessories. The contemporary sleek Bradford Ultra Slim Fit pants. Bradford, where quality is tradition, a tradition every man deserves.
It's different.
Cute.
Whole-sized for lorries are now bite-sized. It's the new fun and convenient way to enjoy Bolori.
You can eat it in one bite.
Whole-sized roti shaw, arima tunapuna sawa at Port Spain.
Get serious about insulation. Use R-Foil Reflective Insulation. It blocks 96% of radiant heat, allowing you to keep your rooms cool and reduce your air conditioning costs. It's made from quality materials, making it durable and long-lasting. Plus, it comes with a 10-year warranty. R-Foil is Class 1, Class A fire rated, meeting international fire safety standards. Use R-Foil Reflective Insulation, available exclusively from Island Roofing. Call 672-7663 or visit us at Southern Main Road, Canupia today.
'Tis the season to receive the perfect gift, or two, or three. At Value Optical, share joy and happiness with a free frame or polarized lenses and other offers. It's the perfect gift for you and your entire family. See online, press, and in-store for more details. Merry Christmas from Value Optical, caring for your eyes.
After heavy rains in October, the B-Mobile T10 Community Cricket League returns. The action kicks off this January with the top 8 teams from across Trinidad and Tobago. As they enter the round robin, they will be hoping to master the competition and emerge as one of the top 4 moving on to the playoffs. Come out to Pier Road Recreation Ground, Chaguanas, and watch as the action heats up. And be sure to visit T10CCL.com for all your updates, match reports, and stats. It's T10 cricket at its best in the B-Mobile T10 Community Cricket League, taking communities across boundaries.
Everybody get ready!
This one is house to house para. Lime and drinks with a piece of ham. Old talk and soca paranga. Competing for the best paramba. Come join in the paramba.
5 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago on this Wednesday. Yes, Wednesday after the long weekend, Christmas, then Boxing Day, and don't forget New Year's Day to come next Monday. We were reminding you again very quickly that you have until midnight tonight to cast your vote among the 5 candidates for the TV6 People's Choice Sports Personality of the Year, which will be unveiled on Friday. God willing, the second hour of Friday's show will be devoted to our discussion and the vote and the results, and hopefully our interview whoever would have won that title. But let's return to our dialogue as we start the second hour of Morning Edition after the long weekend with David Abdulah, the leader of the MSJ, the Movement for Social Justice. David, I leave it up to you to move to take the discussion forward.
Thanks, Miles. Very kind of you. Well, one of the things I think that we have suffered from in the last couple of years is the absence of vision for the country and a sense of hope. And hope, of course, one could say, how is that measured? You can't measure hope and so on. But it's measured in confidence in many respects. Business confidence. Many people in the business community would say to me that they're reluctant to invest because there's no clear direction to the economy, how we're going to be diversifying, how we're going to get out of the difficulties as a result of the fall in oil prices and so on. So unless there is a sense of hope and confidence, then a lot of other factors tend to come into play in terms of social relations, in terms of the political relations and so on. And I think that people don't see any hope either in terms of how the government handles matters, nor do they see it necessarily in terms of the opposition. And so that is a predicament that the country finds itself in. It's manifests in very simple ways that one may see, for example, the issue of the vote last week on the United Nations General Assembly on the issue of Jerusalem and the decision by Trump to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv, yes, to Jerusalem, and to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And we abstained on that when we should have supported the resolution condemning the Trump administration. And the fact that CARICOM itself was divided was not a good thing either. So, key issues. The Prime Minister was absent from the CARICOM Cuba summit in Antigua about 3 weeks ago. One of only two, perhaps, prime ministers who did not attend the CARICOM Cuba summit. So these things suggest that there's not a clear vision and policy direction going forward. And when that happens, then there's a loss of confidence. The police commissioner, and I know you're going to interview Professor Diosan in a moment, and so on. We don't know what is going to come up with the appointment of a new commissioner of police. But the fact that we have not had a permanent appointment for 5 years now, I think it is an indication where people can lose confidence in the police service, and not only police service, but our institutional arrangements, where it takes 5 years to appoint a commissioner of police. That's just unacceptable. The sea bridge, and I heard you mention that there was a problem on the air bridge over the weekend. So, all of these things which put stresses and strains on people's lives day to day add up to a loss of confidence and hope. One negative impact of that is that people give up and say, well, not that we like it so, but we can't do anything about it. It's so,
And that seems to be the prevailing attitude. And I mean, I'm just wondering, can we lay that attitude, the blame for that attitude, purely at the feet of the politics? Or is it about something about the Trini mentality of indifference towards whatever might seem to be either very negative, and saying, well, but we can't do anything about it, let me just go on with your life?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much indifference, but a sense of people not having a clear idea about how to change it. Or not being prepared or not being courageous enough to change it. So particularly, I think among professional people, but it's not limited to that, people will say, well, I am relatively comfortable. If once I could get my children to the best schools, get them into employment, whether it's here or outside of Trinidad and Tobago and so on, we are okay. What the group that Lloyd Best called the validating elites. I would have described it differently, but he called it validating elites, so let's just go with that. He felt that section of the society, the professionals, those people who have done relatively well in the country and so on, people in the business community, have failed to provide leadership and failed to try to change things. And the reason really is because we are part of the status quo.
We like it so.
And yes, those who are part of the status quo like it so, and therefore have no impelling reason to bring about change. And on the other hand, lots of people who are in conditions of great difficulty, not being able to have proper shelter or enough money to survive on, and so on, and their children are the ones who are part of the 50% who fail or are failed by the education system every year, or who end up in jail or have to go to the hospitals because they can't afford private medical attention, and so on. The vast majority of the population are struggling just to survive, and therefore find it more difficult to be involved in activity to bring about change. And that is perhaps why the status quo has not yet been challenged.
Couple of things in the time that we have available. I want to get the perspective as well of, for example, the Beetham situation of not so long ago, and the ease with which the different politicians are able to manipulate either Beetham or Cuva or wherever else. How easily they do that, which is one, and is that something that is almost impossible to break that stranglehold? But before that, in fact, I lost my train of thought asking the question. But let's deal with that first of all. Okay, now cut back what I want to say. Is it that people have already experienced an effort of trying to bring about change? The NAR of 86 to 91, we saw what happened. The COP of 2006, 2007, 100 and something, so we saw what happened when they became part of the People's Partnership. The MSJ was part of the People's Partnership. And it's on the basis of that experience that people realize that there's no other option. Yeah,
I think there is a great level of cynicism, and you're right. After every, when people have great hopes and expectations about things being different, and then those hopes get dashed. In a sense, it's once bitten, twice shy. People are reluctant or become more reluctant to make the personal effort and take initiative and so on to do something. And it's more, it's more of a challenge to motivate people to say, let's make one last effort. And then there's a generational thing. So some of the people who were involved in the NAR in 86 or the COP in 2007, just to call some examples, or the partnership in 2010, who may have been 45, 50, whatever, 35 in 86.
Let's not forget the ONR in 1981
that's
as
right.
well.
And now 55, 60, 65, and you say, well, listen, we did our best. We fired our best shot in that sense, politically. It didn't work. It's now left up to another generation to move it forward. And I do think that the possibilities for change lie with a younger generation. Not that older persons would be involved, but you might very well get a kind of Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn type movement where you have some older persons who have been in the trenches for many years, but supported by many young people who are disgusted, fed up, disenchanted with the status quo, with the system as it is, and say we want to change that system, and they then become motivated to engage.
But they're
in
still on the
process.
outside looking in, isn't that correct? Bernie Sanders couldn't even get the Democratic nomination. Jeremy Corbyn is still seen as too radical, even for many in his own party.
Well, all right. Sanders, of course, had a huge uphill battle. He came very, very close, much closer than anybody else gave him credit for, and still don't give him credit for coming so close. And perhaps had the Democratic Party, the status quo within the Democratic Party, not been so rigid in terms of their support for Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders may have very well won the presidency. In the case of Corbyn, the polls will show that he's way ahead of Theresa May right now. And in fact, the Labour Party, if the election was called again in the UK, the Labour Party would win. So I wouldn't write off Jeremy Corbyn at this moment at all, or the fact that his politics and his ideas have and are holding sway in the UK in a significant way. So I think that we have to recognize not just the actual success or failure defined by whether you win office and so on, but the general momentum and direction that they have represented.
But is that momentum reflected here? Are you really seeing that? I mean, you are in the politics. You have to want to see change because that's the only way you're going to have a say in the direction of the country. But is it really happening? Are people really believing that the two options, PNM, UNC, and that mentality associated with it just isn't relevant anymore?
People are saying that to me, and some may be mama-guying me because, that's part of the possibility of the reality of Trinidad politics and so on. But there are others who I think are very genuine. The majority of people come and say to me, listen, we really are very disappointed with the PNM. We thought that things would have been very different, but they're not. We can't see ourselves going back to the UNC. And so, we see you offering ideas for the future. Now, whether people see those ideas, as one gentleman said to me, or two of them came to me when I was in Gulf City on Christmas Eve day on Sunday. I was just waiting to get something to eat or pick up something to eat and so on, and I was sitting down by myself. And two gentlemen came up, one African, one Indian, both of them in their 50s, early 60s perhaps, or thereabouts. And both of them said to me, quite independent, they didn't know each other, and they came up to me quite independently of each other and said to me, Mr. Abdulah, we like what you're doing, you like your ideas, PNM and UNC can't move the country forward, your ideas are the right ideas, but they also said, which is the point you're making, that you need to get more mass support and appeal if you can, in order to make that breakthrough. And that they were not sure that that would happen. And again, it came back to the entrenched politics of race.
Exactly.
It came back to that.
And,
yeah.
and just on that point, and before we get to the issue of the manipulation of the masses issue, just to that point, that even if you have good ideas, even if your ideas or any other organization, any other group were to be coming up with something that is far more visionary, far more forward-looking, Second Republic or whatever you want to call it, that you don't have the resources, you don't have the connection that the established political parties have, the relatively easy access to the resources that will allow them to transmit their message far wider and far more effectively than you will ever be able to do.
And of course, one can identify resources in different ways. So yes, we don't and will never have the kind of money in an election campaign that the PNM and the UNC will have. But then those parties, because of the financing that they require, so they believe, to run their campaigns, become beholden to the financiers. And we see the implications of that in terms of how contracts are awarded or not awarded, as the case may be. So we, on the other hand, don't necessarily require those resources at all. And the Sanders campaign, I think, is an indication of that, where a lot of grassroots support came and people volunteering time and energy, because you can communicate messages not only by way of very expensive television ads, which your station would benefit from,
of course,
during the election period and so on, and perhaps the media would love to have another election.
The media was the happiest when we had three elections in the space
of 2 years or whatever. 2 years,
absolutely.
Yes, exactly. There were more actually, because there was local government elections and THA elections at the same time, so there were really 5 elections within about 2 years and so on. So yes, because quite apart from social media, there is actually the best way of communicating, which is person to person. And so we are trying to build up enough people who can communicate our message on the ground in communities, because the trust and confidence has been lost. Come back to the cynicism and so on. But one reflection of that is the loss of trust and confidence. And people, you need to win people's trust and confidence, not by a mama guy, but by actually listening to people and working with them in their communities to try to bring about change, which is not saying to them, we expect you to vote for us because we did something for you in the community, but let us now try to make your lives better today by working with you to resolve problems in the community. And we've begun to do that in a number of communities, and we're getting some traction from that.
And in the few minutes that we have left, I'd like you to deal with the issue of those communities, where you call them hotspots, whether you call them vulnerable communities, where you call them disadvantaged, whatever term you use. They continue to be communities that are very are very easily, or at least appears to be very easily manipulated by the different politicians. All the leader of a particular party has to say a certain thing about one race or the other, and it galvanizes that sort of support. How do you break that stranglehold, if that is the intention?
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's only those communities that are called, quote-unquote hotspot areas, which not necessarily a term I like. But I mean, if you go in parts of Valsayn, just a
I was going to say Valsayn myself. That's why we had the discussion, David.
Yes.
I mean, even during the break, that people who appear to be very well educated and should have a broader worldview.
Yes.
Go back to the race at the first opportunity.
Yes, exactly. So it's across the board, and so what we have to be able to do is to say to people, regardless of where they live, listen, what are your circumstances? And have your circumstances really been significantly changed? Now, of course, different people would identify their circumstances differently. So the Valsayn may say that their problem is the issue of feeling insecure or crime or whatever it is and so on, and that has not changed over the last 20 years. In the Beetham and Sealots, their issues are about the quality of life that they have, which is not a quality of life that is acceptable in a country that is still as rich as Trinidad and Tobago is, and so on, and what is the future for their children, and so on. And those are the things that I think that we have to touch people's hearts and minds with, and to say to people, hold a mirror up to your face and ask yourself, in the quiet of moments of your day, are you really satisfied and happy with the circumstances in which you are in? And can you honestly say that the nature of our political system, not just the individuals who run the system, but the way in which our politics is organized, our systems of governance and our institutions and so on, have they really served you as a citizen well? And if not, do we not need to say change is necessary and so on? And of course, change takes place sometimes imperceptibly over a period of time, and you're not seeing anything happening. It's like water dropping on a spot of concrete, and you don't think anything is happening, and then all of a sudden a crack opens and the thing falls apart. And I think that is the process along which we are going. And 2018 is going to be a very critical year for this country.
We say that ahead of every year.
Yes, and in many respects, I think 2018 is going to be very critical. The economy is going to continue to limp along. That's
well, we had the Attorney General saying just the other day at the cabinet thing that the 2018 is going to be a very good year. He's very confident. He's virtually assuring, if not exactly assuring, virtually assuring the nation 2018 will be better.
The Prime Minister, I think, said something a little less optimistic when he was saying, things are going to continue to be very difficult, and I think things are going to be very, very difficult. The government's revenue situation is going to continue to be challenged in terms of meeting expenditure, and so that is going to put pressure on everybody else because of how it is, and the loss of confidence and the lack of hope and the absence of a vision will aggravate all of the existing difficulties that we have. But I think that there is hope, because I think that more and more people are recognizing that we need change, and to the extent that we can convince people of the type of change that we need, not just changing faces and changing the symbol or the color of the shirt and so on that is in the government, but fundamental real change, to the extent that we could do that, then we have hope going forward.
David Abdulah, thanks very much for taking the time to join us this morning. Hopefully you have your umbrella with you to get to the vehicle. It's raining very, very hard in downtown Port of Spain this morning as we continue into the last half an hour of our morning edition on this Wednesday after the long weekend, and many people still in the holiday mood with Old Year's and New Year's Day coming up as well. But when we come back after the break, we'll be joined by Professor Ramesh Diosaran to give his perspective on policing and national security issues to which he's very well acquainted. We'll be back right after this break.